Hello everybody and welcome back. It is the fresh side of a brand new year, so happy new year to everyone. It's been a couple of weeks since the last release came out, but we are jumping back on the train now that the holidays are done to return to F1 2019. And what better place to come back to after you've had some time out of the car and lost a little bit of touch than Singapore, a very tough street circuit, very technical, a lot of corners and craziness going on. So had to spend a lot of time in the practice sessions to kind of get my skill back up, and it definitely showed in qualifying to try and get a feel for the car again. So we'll see how this weekend kind of plays out for us across. We do come into the weekend third in the Drivers' Championship, so we're having a pretty solid season so far. Unfortunately, both of our developments fail, so we have nothing new coming in. It's really the last developments we were going to have for the year. As you can see now, all of the orange all over the place. Those are our two regulation change areas, engines and aero. So not the worst it could be, not the best. Best for us would have been if it was engines and durability, because that would have been the least, but aero is going to be a lot of replacements to do. So we've hit the phase of the season where we're pretty much going to flatline our car development, and we are going to just pump all of our R&D points into getting these adaptations done so we don't take a big step back at the beginning of next year. So I'm just kind of popping in to see how much some of the stuff is going to cost and repurchase the failed one in the chassis development for next season. We'll basically leave the power development one, I think, because once we do develop that, it's immediately going to have to be adapted. So it's not going to be a big benefit to us to push it through at this stage. So that's going to be the kind of run that we're going to have with our development choice. But you can see it's not super expensive, only $250 to do the adaptation. And we'll see how much we have left to work with on after the races here. Obviously, the major and ultimate upgrades are going to cost us a little bit more, but we are still sitting third in the development chart here, right behind Mercedes, and Red Bull is still quite a ways out ahead. Gearbox is about 50% wear, so that's not too bad, but it's time for us to head out to qualify and see what we can do after being out of practice.
It's time for us to settle down and the drivers below to get fired up. Once again, welcome to Singapore as we get ready for the green light and the start of what should be a fantastic qualifying session. It always looked like the kind of track that asks an awful lot of the rear tyres, such as the frequency of low-speed exits.
No matter how good a driver is at managing their throttle application to limit rear slip, they can't always overcome a car that's inherently bad at looking after its rear tyres. Here we have a lot of low-speed corner exits, which means a whole load of energy, heat and tyre wear.
So here we are popping out as we're finishing up our second flying lap of the first qualifying session. Put in a banker that put us dead last on the grid. So definitely that lack of practice coming through pretty big. Spent a lot of time in the practice sessions, basically as much time as they would allow me to. Just never quite got a perfect feel of the car. Just not having much reference to work off. We got faster and faster as I went through. Also, a couple of the practice sessions got cut short because of rain, so that really didn't help me out in that regard either. But you can see, turned a little bit faster of a lap time, but still bottom of the grid. So we're going to shoot out for this last lap here. Only about a minute left in the session before that checkered flag waves. We're going to be getting this lap in, and that'll be it for this qualifying session. We'll see if we can go quick enough to push ourselves through into Q2. But we are a little bit down on our delta coming into that corner. Pretty much just balancing right around up or down a tenth at this stage of the lap here. You can see there's a Haas behind us that realistically we should be running away from if we're going to put a good lap time in. But the fact that he's hanging tight with us, I believe that's Grosjean right back there. It's not good news for us in terms of our lap time. Pick up about a tenth there with the abusing the track limits a little bit, and then lock up into the hairpin there, lose some time on the exit that we gained on the entry. But we'll hop ahead as we turn the last couple of corners here. Going up about 3.5 tenths there. Is that going to be enough to move us forward? No, it's not. We are still P20 on the grid, so that means with about 6 races left to go in the season, it's going to be a good time for us to take a full new set of engine components, and that'll make sure we won't have to take any more grid penalties the rest of the season to get ourselves all the way to Abu Dhabi at the very end. So we're going to just go ahead and take advantage of sitting at the very back here. I think we've actually at this stage now taken more engine components than we did last season, maybe, if not the same, maybe one more set. But we did have some unfortunate qualifyings throughout this season. The last season was able to run a little more straight through without big gaps in playing caused by the holidays. So I was able to keep my touch up a little bit more, and we were playing on a slightly lower difficulty. So coming right back to the, I believe it's at 95 now, while being out of the seat essentially for 2.5, 3 weeks. Pretty rough to come back to, but at least this allows us to grab a new set of components and not have to worry about wear in that regard for the rest of the season. And we'll see if we can have a good strategy over the course of the race. I know last season we had a pretty decent result, even though we started pretty far down the grid based on having an alternate strategy to the rest. So we'll see if we can replicate that, and we'll see if we can just make up some ground on the back cars here.
Hello and welcome one and all to the shining streets of Singapore. Can you believe we've been coming here for nearly a decade now? It feels like only yesterday that Felipe Massa was dragging his fuel hose down the pit lane in that eventful opening race, and in a Grand Prix won from pole position more often than not, will we see a new victor crowned today? It's a 3.1 mile lap here at the Marina Bay Street Circuit with 47% taken at full throttle. It's hot, humid and bumpy around the 13 lefts and the 10 rights of mostly slow corners. But we should see speeds of up to 200 miles per hour along the Raffles Boulevard. With me today, of course, is Anthony Davidson. Let's talk about old-timer. Looks like they've got a tough race in store today as grid penalties from changing power unit components has forced them further down the field.
Everyone has to deal with penalties or reliability issues from time to time throughout their career. You just have to suck up the pain and get on with the job at hand. Today isn't about performing a miracle to put the car back where it should be. It's about effective damage limitation.
With the race minutes away from starting, here's what today's grid rundown looks like. An immense lap from Lewis Hamilton yesterday puts him on pole position, edging out Max Verstappen, who'll start from P2. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Perez, Stroll, Pierre Gasly, and Vettel, Bottas, Weber, Ricciardo, and George Russell, Leclerc, Giovinazzi, Lando Norris, and Grosjean, Albon. They'll be starting further back after an earlier grid penalty. Butler, Kimi Raikkonen, and Kevin Magnussen, Sainz, and Oldtimer. And with lights out just moments away, it's time to go down to the track.
We're not starting where we wanted. We'll need to fight our way up the grid today.
Truer words were never spoken, Jeff. We're definitely going to have to fight our way through this grid. So we'll pop into the strategy, and I'm thinking of taking the reverse strategy. Now, it's a pretty high degradation track just because of the ton of low-speed corners, a lot of traction zones getting on the power, so we're not going to be able to run the medium-soft that we've run in a few other tracks, so it's definitely going to be a medium and hard combination. I had taken a look at the softs in the practice sessions. They just really didn't hold up very well aside from one or two quick lap paces for qualifying. So we're going to go ahead and go start on the hards, give up some ground in the early stages of the race, and then switch onto the mediums and get on a slightly faster tire and see if we can't run ourselves up the field. But the lights are out and we are down the main straight. Give a little bit of a space as they get ahead. As they bunch up, we're going to go ahead and pick a lane, dive down the inside here, kind of rumble over the curbing. We're going to have a look into turn 3 as well. Down the inside, 3 wide, as it gets a little squeezed out. Signs in the McLaren there. We got Magnussen just ahead of us. We're kind of pinned outside against the wall here. We're going to have to try and hang it out around the side, but we're going to go ahead and let Magnussen slot in right in front of us and settle down. We picked up 2 positions in the first 2 corners, or 3 corners there, so not a bad start, but another hard braking zone as they're going to all kind of snake back up to us. So we'll dive down the inside of Magnussen. We'll swap sides and dive down the inside of his teammate Grosjean. We had just enough of a window to work through in that area. Now we're down behind 2 of the Toro Rossos and Lando Norris in his McLaren right in front of us. So there we are, up P16 now. still working on the first lap here, about midway through. Not a lot of passing opportunities through this sector here, over the bridge, the hairpin. A good run through the hairpin though. We swing it wide to try and get a little earlier on the traction. Try and get a good run down into the next corner. We're going to turn up the ERS, grab some slipstream, and take a look to the inside of Alex Albon there. See if we can't make the pass. He's still a little bit along our rear panel there, so we're not going to cut to the wall as tight as we normally do, but now we're able to finally outbrake him and set him squarely behind us. Next in our sights is Devin Butler, the other Toro Rosso right in front of us, our old F2 rival, who's really struggled in this season. Really got stuck in a pretty poor performing car who hasn't developed particularly well. Which, from what I've seen reading about from other people playing their career modes, is kind of an anomaly. Apparently, Lucas and Devin are pretty much, God mode cheats in a lot of people's other career modes. At this stage, Devin is pretty much languishing at the back of the field in the Toro Rosso team. And Lucas has had some good races here, but he's, performing kind of where that Alpha should perform, I feel. He's not been crazy. But yeah, some of the other people have seen huge development leaps, even especially in the first 2 seasons at like Toro Rosso and Alfa Romeo for those guys. But it's not really the case this time, as Albon tries to take a look down the outside of us as he got the slipstream down that main straight. No DRS yet, but we managed to hold him off. Unfortunately, our little fight with him cost us a little bit of ground to Devin Butler there, so we're going to have to close back up on him. The flip side is we do get a little bit of a slightly cleaner air on our front wing, not have to run quite as much in traffic there, save the front tires a little bit, and our strategy really relies on running these hards with good lap times for as long as possible before we jump onto the mediums and then really just pound those guys into the ground. But we're going to hop ahead lap 5. As far as tire deg goes, it's really not the fronts that are the big issue though. It's the rears. There's so many low speed corners that you're exiting out of. But you can see we've caught up to Ricardo. It looks like Butler has made his way past the Australian here. So we have our next target in front of us, and there's been a pretty significant gap open up in front of us. But we do have yellow flags out. There's a big slowdown behind us. Virtual safety car is out, so something big must have happened. We'll see. Looks like 2 stop or very slow moving cars there. See an orange and a red and a tan. So we got Grosjean, and I believe that was Sainz that was out of the session, because I think Lando Norris is still out ahead of us. But a big wreck takes those 2 out of the race. Only 18 runners, so now we're just kind of trying to skirt the delta of the VSC as we keep it right as close to flat zeros as we can. But here we go, virtual safety cars coming in.
Maintain your pace until the green flag. VSC ending, wait for green.
And there we go, green flag. So full power. Looks like Ricardo and Butler got a little bit of a better jump off the green flag than I did. They were a little closer to speed on their deltas than I was. I was probably about 3/10 down. There's one VSC that I had last season that pretty much nailed it and got it to almost flat zeros as it went green. But this time lost a little bit of ground. So we're going to have to fight our way back towards this group, and they're running pretty well so far. I mean, not as good as the group in front of them, but enough to make it not an easy catch-up for me here. I'm just kind of sandwiched between the Toro Rossos and with the Renault there as well. Hopefully we can get our way through this group and start making some headway on the lead cars here. We're definitely trying to make as much ground in as many positions as we can on these hards, because when we do take our pit stop, we will lose some of those positions back. We are going to have to fight our way kind of back through the field on our mediums once we get that tire change done. But we're going to hop ahead lap 9, so a couple laps on from the VSC. Butler has kind of run away from Ricardo here, but we are finally starting to catch him up. We are in the DRS range of him. Not quite enough to get an attack on him here this time through, so we're going to settle in and try and set ourselves up for the next DRS straightaway. Now, this being a street circuit, I'm running a pretty high wing angle. Was really just struggling to make times on the practice deltas in the corners, so I really had to dial those up. It does cost me a bit on the straightaways here, so I really have to get a great exit in order to challenge guys into braking zones, even with the DRS. But you can see I send it down the inside of Daniel Ricciardo there. Use that little bit of outer runoff that you can hop to. The The real life F1 racing line around that corner, since it has that street to the side, it's almost to straddle that curbing on the exit as opposed to just putting your right side tires on it. You really kind of get your right side tires onto that fresh concrete as well, and just let the curbing kind of run down the middle of the car. So you kind of take that corner as wide as possible. But here we go. We've finally got past Ricciardo. A little bit of wheel spin on the exit. He's also on the hard tires. Devin Butler is on the medium, so that would explain how he made up so much ground in front of Ricciardo there. He's running a faster compounded tire, and that Sting's still going to have some pretty good life at this stage of the race. They should start to feel Deg in that one, I think, probably in 2 or 3 laps time. We are going to be running these hards for almost 20 laps. I think lap 19 is our 18 or 19 is our target, so I think 12 or 13 will be their pit target as well. But you can see just how much ground we've already started to close up as our teammate George Russell, you can see that pale blue dot in the map there right before we cut away. He's holding up that group of cars, so that's going to allow us to reel our way in. I spent a lot of time down the main front straight, kind of weaving inside to outside. It being a DRS straight, I try and do as much as I can just to change the angle, try and break the toe as much as possible, and not let them get a good run on me into turn 1 there. And of course you see Ricciardo with that wing open, catching us up on turn 2. We can try and set ourselves to the inside to defend. No, he's not quite close enough to attack us. That is a big defense point. That's a pretty long straightaway to handle. So you definitely have to be careful. And another big wheel spin. You can see just how much we're starting to wear out the rear tires, heating them up a lot under these circumstances. A lot of the low speed exits, just very easy to get a little bit overzealous on the throttle, and then the back end just kind of steps out on you. So lucky enough to keep the car under control in those situations. And the braking zone over the bridge there is also another very tough section. Your car is just very unsettled as you hit that braking zone. A lot of rear wheel lockups through that one. Not a lot of front tire lockups. But as the car's kind of skating around the corners, and obviously I run a setup that's a little more rear end free and a little more nose planted than a lot of other setups. Under braking, that can get a little bit exacerbated, so I tend to have to play with the brake bias a little bit more to keep the car balanced in those situations, because the rear end definitely does like to brake free, and if you hit a real hard braking zone with a little bit of steering in, you can really step the back end out and lock those tires up and send yourself flying through. But you see, we're going past up to P13 now as Valtteri Bottas is ducked into the pits. I believe he's going to be running a 2-stop in this race, so I don't know if he took on some damage or something earlier on. We'd have to look at replays back there to find out, but he's running a 2-stop. I think one of the only ones there. But we hop ahead, lap 15, so a few more laps. Pretty much all the medium runners have popped into the pits. We're sitting 7th in here. Perez right behind us has actually started on the mediums. He was one of the front-running cars. He is out on the hards and really just reeling us in at this stage as we struggle to get the throttle down out of some of these corners with the back end stepping out on us. But he is right up on our bumper with DRS. He's going to go by us. Not a lot of fight from us there. It wasn't one that we were going to kind of battle with him for very long. So we'll tuck right in, try and grab as much slipstream as we can to help our lap times out. But Ricciardo is still on our heels with his hard tires there. He, though, should not be able to get by us because we're pretty much on even footing entire life. But Perez on the much fresher tires, and a Racing Point car that's just really been performing pretty well over the second half of the season so far. Has put up some surprise performances throughout the season, showing up big again. He's running kind of with the front runners, and we'll see where he finishes today's race, barring any wrecks or mistakes. You see on the map the pale blue dot just ahead of that red dot. George Russell, our teammate, is a little ways up the road. It's going to be a fight to catch him. I believe he was, I think he started around 10th, middle of the pack, whereas we started at the very back. So we definitely had to fight our way through a lot of the traffic early on in the phases of this race. But at just this point, as the tires are falling off pretty significantly now, it's just a matter of trying to keep Ricciardo behind us until we hit our pit phase and see where we come out. right, so here we are jumping ahead, lap 18, about to be lap 19, and we are into the pit lane. We run down this long pit lane. We'll see who goes by us. Giovinazzi, Lance Stroll is going to get by us. We are probably one of the last cars to make the pit stop. We'll see how that does for us. So we're down 14-15 behind Devin Butler there. So we lost some ground on the strategy. Looks like Alex Albon has gotten through us, and as we have to follow the pit limiter line, Kevin Magnussen also gets by us. But now we are in the closing stages of this race. We got 12 laps left to go. We are on a much faster tire with a lighter fuel load at this stage. So now it's time to kind of put our head down and chew our way back through the field as much as we can. Starting P20, you know, the goal is to try and get into the points, but it's a pretty big goal to hit. Have to pick up 10 positions over the course of a race when everybody's pretty evenly matched over these 50% distances. I don't want to say evenly, but you don't really get to cut through the field super easily. We're just at this point kind of biding our time, getting the tires up to temperature, seeing if Magnussen will make a lane for us, as we can be a little bit late on the brakes there. We kind of have to deviate to keep from crashing into the back of him. Down this straight is usually a decent passing opportunity, but with the poor exit out of the hairpin, not going to be a good chance to really dive through the inside of him here. So just kind of peeking for the next line, which will probably be down the start-finish straight. So we're just going to try and keep ourselves close to Magnussen's gearbox. We do lose a little bit of that turn-in on the nose, which is tough through this section, which is very left, right, right, left, right. So we have to kind of make sure not to lose too much front grip, but I think we're in a pretty good spot here as we get ready to enter the final corner. You see the front wing right under his gearbox there. DRS is open. We're going to grab as much draft as we can. Think about looking outside, dive to the inside as we get on the brakes there, and get cleanly through him into turn one there. So now we have to get smoothly on the throttle, and we're going to go ahead and chase down Danny Rick once again, who came out ahead of us in the pit cycle. So he ran a little bit faster on his pit cycle, and we'll just have to chase him down and try and make that position up. That's one man down to try and get ourselves back into the points-paying positions. Now we are starting to open up in the championship, a modest gap to Leclerc in fourth, but he's in a Ferrari, which is a pretty quick car, and you don't want to give him any opportunities to score a couple podiums and really push us down. So we definitely want to try and pick up at least 1 point at this phase. So you see Ricardo is already all over the tail end of Alex Albon, who I believe is running a hard tire. I think he was one of the guys who started on mediums. So Ricardo is also running the strategy that we are, the reverse strat, which is those media or hards onto the mediums for that extra bit of pace at the tail end of the race. But if we're lucky, we might be able to have an opportunity to make a double pass if Albon holds him up enough, or it's going to make it very interesting down the next DRS straight, as two of us will have DRS and the other will not. So I'm going to have to really lean in and kind of play to what moves Ricardo makes, since he should have the overspeed on Albon, and we don't want to get caught up behind him if he's unable to make the pass. So here we are getting on the throttle as we come through the final corner. DRS is open. We have a little look to the inside, kind of check for open air. Ricardo looked to the outside, so we decided to stay to the inside and tuck in behind Albon. So not a double overtake, but we were able to make the move on Ricardo and get through him here. And now if we can get a good exit off of this corner here, we will have DRS down the next straight and a chance to pick that other position up. So grab as much slipstream as we can coming down this section of the track, that little kink. We're going to swing to the outside, use the extra traction that we have, brake a little later, hold a little bit higher speed through the outside edge of the corner there. We've got enough grip on those medium tires compared to his hards to really hang it out around the outside and keep our speed up and not lose that grip around the less grippy part of the track there. So we're able to make that one pretty cleanly. Not the ideal dive and take the inside of the corner, but hanging it out around the outside is another fun way to get after it. So now we got to make up a little bit of ground and start chasing down the cars in front of us here as we come through that hairpin and down the straight. We'll see if we can see It's going to be Devin Butler in front of us. Once we cross the timing line, we've got about 3.7 seconds back, but he is on hard tires, so he'll be running a little bit slower. And it looks like there's a bit of a group ahead of us. I see a red, a tan, and an orange, so it's going to be an Alpha, a McLaren, and one of the Haas cars to go along with Devin Butler in that Toro Rosso. We're P14 right now, so that is going to be P10 if we can get to the front of that group. We have 10 laps left to go to catch and make all of these passes at this stage. So we'll see what we can do coming out around the final corner. You see that kind of cyan dot, the Mercedes of Valtteri Bottas right in front of us coming out of the pits there. Really, we have to swing wide and alter our line. Loses us some time coming out of that corner as he jumps out of the pits, but he's completed his two-stop strategy, so he's on quite a bit fresher medium tires than us. But we are going to see if we can't get our way through him as well. And take a little look to the inside. Not quite enough ground. We're going to have to back out of that one. Don't want to lose a wing while we're trying to get ourselves up back into the points. And there's a cluster of 3 cars not too far behind us, so we don't want to lose ground to that either on a mistake that sends us wide where we got to kind of recover the car off of a runoff area. And this track is just a monster in the real world. I mean, it's one of the longest races of the season in Singapore. You know, it's in kind of the post-summer section, but it's always very hot and humid. You see famous pictures of drivers after this race sitting in ice buckets and ice baths. You know, depending on what team they're working for, you see the different quality and grade. I think last year there was a picture of Pierre Gasly from Toro Rosso last season. His picture was him literally in a Rubbermaid trash can that was just full of ice water. It was pretty hilarious, whereas you see like one of the Ferrari guys in a literal like nice bathtub jacuzzi looking deal that has ice. So very different way for teams to handle their post-race cooling down. But it's definitely a grueling race, and it's a tough race mentally too. There's so many corners. I think it's 20 some odd corners around this circuit, all very different speeds, angles, braking zones. So it's a lot to remember and kind of tough to keep your head around. Is we're kind of splitting 2 by 2. We're going to go ahead and take advantage of Bottas swinging a little wide out of that corner, so we're going to go ahead and get that position back from him. But now we're in that train. If we can get to the front of it, it's points. If we don't make it through this train before the end of the race, no points. So it's a pretty cut and dry situation for us. I mean, obviously getting to 10th is only 1 point, which it's not going to help us hugely in the grand scheme of things. But every point, you know, counts. I'd rather have a point than no points, and it's going to be a pretty large gap to try and catch the next cars. But you can see Bottas just all over the back of us as we come through the bridge section, over through the hairpin. We're going to have a tiny look, not quite enough lane. It's not a DRS straight, but it is definitely an overtaking zone. It's long enough to catch some good slipstream. But here we are in a non-traditional spot. We're going to dive down the inside of Butler there. He just left a little too much of the door open into that right-hander, and we were able to be a little bit later on the brakes with the fresher, softer compounded tire. So we're able to make a position up. We're now P12. We've got Norris and Lucas in front of us. Only 2 more people to make it through. Lap 23 of 31 here. So we are almost in position to get ourselves back to the points. But DRS is open. You can see it kind of weaving left, right, trying to find an opening. But we are super late on the brakes there. Send it right past Lando Norris. I always love that camera angle down through this little S section of turns 1, 2, 3. Really kind of shows the change of direction and the speed that the cars have and how much they dance left to right. And just how much grip they have. I mean, even driving them from the T-Cam, you really don't have a great appreciation for how fast you take some of the corners, as we're going to go ahead and go around the outside of Lucas Weber and into P10 now. So we've got eyes ahead. I believe it's the racing point of Lance Stroll is next up, but we'll have to wait for a timing line to see how far ahead he is. You can see he's about 2 corners ahead of us, coming through that little kink before heading up to the bridge. Once we get down the next straight, we'll be able to see just how far ahead he is and how much time we have to make up. And we still have laps left in this race. So if we can be running a significant pace over him, which there's a good chance of. I mean, he's running the hard tire. Valtteri is getting a little caught up in that group, so that's going to help us run a little bit. But 5.4 seconds and about 7 laps to go. We're going to hop ahead. Lap 27. We've got ourselves right up on the tail of Lance Stroll here as we're finishing up lap 27, headed to lap 28. But you can see on the minimap, Valtteri in his Mercedes has made his way through that group and is starting to chase us down now. So if we can get and hold P9, get twice as many points, 2 versus 1. But if Valtteri's able to get by us, and it's probably going to take some defensive work. But Stroll is pretty slow through the second to last corner. You can see the exit we get pulled kind of alongside. A little nudge as we get in there as he's kind of diving to the inside, defending it. But we're going to be later on the brakes and finally make our way through, and we managed to close up a 5-second gap in about 4 laps. So we were running at significantly higher lap times than him, or lower lap times rather, higher speeds. But now we just have to make sure he is not going to get by us through this DRS zone, and I think we'll be able to get past him. But hop ahead, final lap. You can see Valtteri right on our tail. We've been defending for a little while, just kind of moving the inside of braking zones, but nowhere for him to make his way through. Max Verstappen once again takes the win. And you can see on the top left there, Charles Leclerc is only 1 position out in front of us, so it's not going to be a huge windfall of points for him either, catching up to us.
Okay, pick up rubber and bring it home.
It was a magnificent race and a drive right out of the top draw to take the win for Red Bull today. What do you think it was, Ant, that gave them the edge over the competition today?
I think a large part of the result comes down to temperament. They were able to keep their heads when everyone around them was losing theirs, and that's allowed them to get the best out of the car, to maximise the strategy, and to stay out of trouble.
Red Bull put up an outstanding fight for the front position today, and it's great to see it paid off for them. They do so much for the sport that you can't help but be delighted by today's race win. So let's review the updated driver's standings. Max Verstappen should be pleased with his performance, making gains at the top of the table. After an incredible day of racing, who was your driver of the day, Ant?
I have to give it to Old Timer. They pushed and pushed and found some fantastic performance. It was just a pleasure to watch.
It's time to see how things are shaping up in the Constructors' Championship. Red Bull pull further ahead in the standings. Well, Ant, an end to another fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you for the next one.
You can see Valtteri finished only about a half second behind us, but Leclerc only 1 position ahead of us. So he picks up 2 points on us in the championship, which when we're running at the amount of points that we have, it's a pretty good spot for us not to lose too much ground on him. If he was to nail down a podium or something, which speaking of, Sergio Perez and that Racing Point on the podium again this race. But you can see we still have a good about 20-point cushion over him. We just can't let races like that happen again. I mean, big part of it was just kind of being out of practice and not in the feel of the car. It would have been much easier to have taken that break before the Monza race, because Monza, a much easier track to kind of get back up to speed. Singapore and Monaco were probably the 2 I would not want to take big breaks before, but that's just kind of how it shook out for us this season. But managed to make something out of nothing there and managed to take the engine penalties. But we got about 1,000 points. Not a big R&D point haul for that race because we didn't have a particularly great result there. And so we're just going to go ahead and spend some of those points adapting parts. Now, unfortunately, another thing that happened this race weekend is our team goal was to complete over the next 2 race weekends 8 practice programs. And being off the pace, I wasn't able to put up satisfactory times in most of the practice programs. I think I only finished 2 of them with appropriate time, or 1 of them with appropriate time. So I don't think we're going to have enough practice programs. I think there's only 6 practice programs. So we are going to lose out on the potential for some extra R&D points there as well, which is definitely not what we want. But we've spent basically all the R&D points that we can there doing our adaptations throughout. I'm going to go ahead and take a peek at the life of our gearbox. It's skirting the issues range. I mean, once you hit over 70%, you have the chance for gearbox jams and that sort of thing. Once you get around 75 or so, then it's almost guaranteed. So hopefully we don't run into issues at the next races coming up. Well, next race, because that'll be the last one. Maybe if we have a modest qualifying session, if we get into, a top 5 but not a top 10, we'll take a 5-place penalty and get a new gearbox in there just for safety's sake, because we are in the closing stages of season 2 here, and we're going to try and put ourselves, see if we can finish out this season 3rd in the Drivers' Championship, and our car is comfortably P4 in the Team Constructors Championship. But we'll see. We are headed off to Russia next to start the final little 5-race stretch of the season. Well, thank you guys, and I will catch you all next time. Peace.